This thing looks like it was designed by someone who got tired of luxury vehicles playing it safe, and then did absolutely nothing about it. Full transparency right up front. What you are looking at is an AI-generated fictional concept. No factory, no production line, no showroom. It exists purely in imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth an hour of your time. Because when you remove real-world constraints, you find out what design actually wants to become when nobody is telling it no. What I am going to walk you through today is this: the front face and what it is communicating before this vehicle even moves, the side profile, and the glass philosophy that I think is one of the most deliberate decisions in this entire concept. The interior logic I can build just from reading the exterior proportions, the powertrain architecture that a concept at this positioning level demands, and then my honest verdict, including one specific thing at the rear of this vehicle that I genuinely have not seen executed like this before, and I am saving that for the end. Stay with me. Let's start at the front. Because the front of this concept is not a greeting, it is a statement of intent. That face is aggressive in a way that most motorhome designers are too cautious to attempt. You have a wide, low hood line that splits the front fascia into two distinct visual zones. The upper command deck, which is all white gloss and architectural geometry, and the lower section, which drops into deep matte black with what appears to be a diffuser-style element running the full width. That split is not accidental. What the designer is doing here is borrowing the visual language of a hypercar and applying it at motorhome scale. And it works. The LED strip that runs horizontally across the lower fascia ties the two zones together without softening the aggression. This front face says, "I am not here to blend into a campground." The badge, a stylized winged emblem in white, sits dead center. It reads as a mark insignia, which is the right instinct. At this concept level, you are not building a vehicle, you are building a brand. Now let's move down the side because this is where the real story is. The proportion here is extraordinary. Based on what I can see of the wheel diameter, those turbine-style rims look to be in the 24 to 26-inch range. This concept is sitting somewhere between 45 and 50 feet in length. That is full luxury coach territory. Newell coach, for travel, that bracket. But the roofline is what separates this from anything in production right now. That roofline is almost flat, and I want you to understand how rare that is and how much it matters. Most motorhomes have a slight arc or a stepped profile. This concept has a ruler-straight roofline from the windshield header all the way to the rear cap. What that does is create a silhouette that reads more like a private jet or a luxury superyacht than a vehicle. You have seen this design language in concept cars. You have almost never seen it at this scale on a land vehicle. Now look at that glass. The side glazing on this concept is continuous. One single sweep of blacked-out glass running almost the entire habitable length of the vehicle. That is not three separate windows with pillars between them. That is a structural decision. The designer has made the entire passenger zone a glass wall. Now in a real production scenario, that would create serious engineering challenges around thermal management and structural rigidity. But in concept territory, which is exactly where we are, it communicates one thing clearly. Life inside this vehicle is meant to feel like living inside a panoramic viewing platform. You are not in a vehicle. You are moving through the landscape, and the landscape is your wall art. The two-tone finish is deliberate and extremely well executed. Arctic white on the structural surfaces, piano black on the glass zone and lower body. Gold accent lines at the transition points. That is the exact color palette that signals ultra-premium positioning in 2026. You are seeing it on Rolls-Royce SUVs, on Bentley's latest touring palette, and it translates here with authority. The rear axle setup, and this is important, appears to be a tandem configuration. Two axles at the rear, closely spaced. That is a 6x4 or 6x2 layout. What that means in practical terms is weight distribution across a much larger footprint, which you need when you are carrying the kind of living environment this exterior implies. It also means the chassis is built for serious weight and for serious terrain. Those turbine rims deserve a separate moment. They are aggressive in a way that contradicts the elegance of the body, and I think that contradiction is entirely intentional. The contrast between the architectural precision of the body and the kinetic energy of those rims creates visual tension that keeps your eye moving across the vehicle. It does not let you settle. That is advanced design thinking. The rear of this concept, and I am going to keep the specific detail for the verdict section, has an element that stopped me when I first analyzed this image. Something I have not seen resolved this way anywhere else. We will get there. But first, let's get inside. Because what the exterior is promising, the interior had better be prepared to deliver. Now here is the thing about this concept. We have no interior renders. What we have is arguably better for our purposes. We have the exterior proportions, and I am going to use those to reconstruct what is almost certainly happening inside. Think of this as detective work. Design forensics. Let's start with ceiling height because it sets every other decision. If those wheels are 24 to 26 inches, and the body side sits approximately at the top of the wheel arch, then the interior floor line is somewhere around 48 to 52 inches off the ground. The roofline based on the proportions appears to sit at roughly 13 to 13.5 feet overall vehicle height. Subtract the floor structure, typically 14 to 18 inches on a chassis this size, and you are looking at interior ceiling height of somewhere between 7.5 and 8 feet. That is not motorhome ceiling height. That is penthouse ceiling height. Most production Class A motorhomes give you 6.5 to 7 feet. This concept, if those proportions are intentional, is giving you the sensation of standing in a room, not a vehicle. That changes everything about how the space feels to live in. Now let's zone the interior. Based on that approximate 45 to 50 foot habitable length, I am going to divide this into 5 zones and walk you through each one. The cockpit, approximately the first 8 to 9 feet. That windshield angle is steep and wide. The glass area from the exterior suggests a panoramic cockpit, almost certainly a 2-screen instrument cluster and a large central infotainment display. The driver's environment in a concept at this level would have a heads-up display, a digital mirror system replacing physical mirrors, and likely a retractable steering column for when the autonomous highway mode activates. When this thing is driving itself on the interstate, you do not need to be behind a wheel, and the designer seems to know that. The lounge, the next 10 to 12 feet. This is where that continuous glass wall pays its dividends. Imagine a seating arrangement, probably a curved sectional in Italian leather, positioned so that every seat faces those floor-to-ceiling panels. You are not sitting in a motorhome lounge. You are sitting in a glass box moving through the world. The lighting along that panoramic glass line suggests integrated LED ambient strips. This is a space designed to feel different at 2 p.m. and at 10 p.m. Natural light fills it by day. Warm amber wraps it at night. The kitchen, roughly the middle third of the habitable zone. And I want to be specific here because kitchen design is where a lot of luxury concepts fall apart. Based on the height of this interior, the kitchen is not fighting for ceiling clearance. That means you can have full-height integrated appliances, not the compact, under-counter compromises you see in most motorhomes. I would expect in a concept at this level, an induction cooking surface flush with a stone or quartz countertop, a full-height refrigeration column, and a coffee system integrated into a dedicated bar wall. The storage philosophy here is almost certainly pushed to open with no visible hardware. That continuous black and white exterior palette almost certainly translates inside too. The sleeping quarter, positioned toward the rear, away from the living zone. And in a vehicle this long, there is room to do something almost no production motorhome does properly. Create genuine separation between the sleeping environment and everything else. Not a curtain. Not a sliding door that barely closes. A proper architectural transition. Based on the rear window visible in the lower image, that tall, squared glass panel at the rear, The sleeping quarter very likely has its own rearward view. Imagine waking up, and the first thing you see is whatever is behind you. Mountains, a coastline, a forest. That is not an accident. That is the designer telling you this vehicle is about where you are, not just how you travel. The bathroom. This is always the engineering problem in a concept this ambitious. Water management, gray water capacity, structural constraints around shower pan positioning. But in a vehicle this long, there is no reason the bathroom is a compromise. I would expect a walk-in wet room configuration, not a traditional shower enclosure, but a dedicated wet zone with a linear drain, which is now becoming standard in ultra-luxury European coaches. The Carthago liner for two, which just won the Practical Motorhome 2026 award, pushes in this direction. This concept appears to push further. In smart systems, this is where 2026 and 2027 are genuinely converging. The industry is moving toward fully integrated AI climate management, predictive route planning that accounts for charging infrastructure, and solar management systems that balance roof generation against battery load in real time. A concept at this level is not just imagining those systems. It is assuming them as standard. Here is the engineering reality sitting underneath this concept, and I want to frame it carefully. The industry is in a transition right now that is genuinely fascinating to watch. Coachman's RVX, the most ambitious electric motorhome the RV industry had attempted, was canceled in early 2026 when GM discontinued the chassis it was built on. That project is dead, at least for now. Meanwhile, Integra's Embark just became the world's first range-extended electric motorhome. A large battery for short trips, a gasoline generator engine for long hauls. That is the real-world solution that is actually reaching roads in late 2026. A concept at this positioning level, a vehicle this size, this heavy, this ambitious, would be looking at a different architecture entirely. If this were ever engineered for reality, you would be looking at a dual-motor, dual-axle full electric platform. Think of the heavy EV coach architecture that Arrival and BYD are currently deploying in commercial transport, scaled and refined for private luxury use. We are talking 300 to 400 kilowatt-hours of battery capacity, roughly 4 to 5 times a Tesla Model S, which at this vehicle weight would deliver a realistic range of 250 to 300 miles per charge. Not a weekend range. A stage-to-stage touring range. The solar roof on a vehicle this size, and that flat roofline makes it extremely efficient solar real estate, is not going to be a primary power source. That is a misconception a lot of people have. What rooftop solar does on a vehicle this size is sustain interior systems, climate, lighting, refrigeration, connectivity, when you are stationary. 2 to 4 days of off-grid interior comfort without touching the main battery. That matters enormously for the kind of person who parks this thing by a lake and stays for a week. Dual-axle propulsion also means something important about terrain. This concept does not look like a vehicle that wants to stay on sealed roads, and with torque delivery to both rear axles independently, it does not have to. Let me be straight with you, because I think this concept deserves an honest assessment. What this design does genuinely well is proportion. The relationship between the body volume, the roofline height, and the glass area is resolved in a way that most concept designers, human or AI, get wrong. Usually you see either too much glass that makes the body look weak, or too little glass that makes the vehicle look like a box. This concept sits exactly at the right ratio. That is genuinely difficult to achieve at this scale, and whoever or whatever generated this understood the visual grammar of premium automotive design. What seems impractical, and I will not pretend otherwise, is the maintenance reality of that continuous glass side panel. In a production scenario, you have a single failure surface that runs the entire length of the vehicle. One rock strike at highway speed, and you are not replacing a window. You are replacing a wall. That is a real engineering problem that the concept does not solve, because concepts do not have to. The most impressive single detail in this design, for me, is the rear cap. And here is what I held back for. Look at the rear face in the bottom image. That rear fascia has a geometric light signature, red accent lines cutting at precise angular intervals that mirror the gold line language on the body sides, combined with what appears to be a diffuser element at the base and a raised spoiler lip at the roofline. That rear face is as resolved as the front. Most concepts invest everything in the front and treat the rear as an afterthought. This one treats the rear as a second front face. That is the mark of a designer, human or AI, who understood that this vehicle will be seen from behind just as often as from the front on a highway. The one thing I would change, I would open up the rear quarter glass. That solid panel between the rear axle and the sleeping zone reads as a missed opportunity. Given how much the side glass philosophy dominates the design language, having that solid section at the rear creates a visual interruption that I think undermines the concept's own ambition. What this concept signals about where luxury mobility is heading is this. The boundary between architecture and transport is disappearing. This vehicle is not trying to be a comfortable way to travel. It is trying to be a place you want to be that happens to move. That is a fundamentally different design brief. And it is the brief that the entire luxury motorhome industry is starting to write for itself in 2026. It is fictional. It is AI-generated. It does not exist. And it is still one of the most compositionally resolved motorhome concepts I have analyzed on this channel. Now here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. And I want a real answer, not just a vibe. That continuous glass side panel. Is it a design triumph or a structural liability you would never live with? There is no right answer, but I suspect you already have one. If this kind of breakdown, design forensics on concepts that push past what is currently buildable, is why you come to YouTube, subscribing means you will not miss the next one.